So, hey everyone, happy Friday, unofficially. We'll do the official intro in just like a minute or two as some other people roll in. But yeah, good to have you here today, Aaron. How's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
Doing well, just, working hard, doing behind on everything, which I think is, it's way better than the alternative where you're kind of ahead on everything because you haven't done enough. So, yeah.
I think I'm about 6 months behind on my to-do list.
Yeah, only 6 months. Well, I often joke that, just like we joke about cloning ourselves, I really kind of wish I could be teleported back to January 1st and just catch up on everything, like fill in everything I should have done this whole year. Just have like the whole rest of the year to do, and then I'm just like back today with everything. Just
Yep.
just done. You know.
Yep.
It is kind of like it's not always a good feeling to be like, oh, there's stuff on my to-do list that I'm just gonna have to leave off then, just not getting done. But I don't know. I wonder if people like Elon Musk check off every box on their to-do list. I wonder if they've managed to get it to where they're like, you know what, I'm gonna manage this really well and just get this kind of get this done.
I'm
Or
pretty sure. I think I've read about him. Or I know others where it's just like you wake up. It's like, what are the three things I can get done today? Like, because there's no point in like what are the top priorities and just cut out everything that is not absolutely essential. I think that's probably the only way to pull it off. Otherwise, I mean, I've gotten to the point where I actually don't even have time to do the to-do list. I know that the actual time spent putting together the whole to-do list actually impedes on what I'm doing. So I actually just keep it focused to, what are the two or three things that I can actually get done.
yeah,
So
yeah, for sure. And I used to get a productivity thing going where I had a prioritized checklist of things, and then I also had like a Pomodoro timer of like 25-minute bursts, and then I had like music there to stop the voices in the head so I could just focus. I had the whole
yep,
setup, and I thought it worked really well, but it worked for like a couple weeks, and then eventually running the process became too annoying, got in the way of doing work. So I did the work instead. And now I should probably reintegrate some little things like, I don't know about the timer necessarily. I think the timer was a little bit too, because I found myself ignoring the timer or, you know, kind of doing whatever. I think that specific task things like do you like naturally kind of being like, okay, I'm in this coffee shop until they close, which is at 4. I got another hour and I want to finish this before then, and just staying focused kind of helps
yep.
instead. But the music is one thing where I really need to start like going back in to stop the voice in my head. But yeah, this is all idle chatter. I hope some people have some good results from some of these things.
Well, I actually like music. I actually like to use binaural beats. So if I'm doing a sprint, yeah, anything that I can do to make sure that I'm locked into what I'm doing, because otherwise it's hard to stay focused. And then I got a treadmill desk so that when I'm done with a
Hmm.
sprint, I can kind of like reset and then get back in. So I'm trying that. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, look, I have a treadmill desk too, and just it started to malfunction. I haven't gotten around to fixing it, and I think it's going to just be. It's one of those things where just you know, like at some point at the end of the day, like if I were to die over the weekend, I don't think that lapsing my productivity tools is going to be one of my big regrets. I think it's just going to be, well, I think I did everything that was prioritized. But it's just one of those things. But yeah,
Yep.
before we roll the intro, I assume there's a lot of people joining in. If you do use, you can actually throw a link in a couple of the chats there. First of all, everyone, how's the sound? Let me know how the sounds, if anyone's too loud, if anyone's not loud enough, etc. It looks good from my end, but you know, I also don't show up as high because of like the depth of my voice on the audio levels as other people. So sometimes I'm used to seeing them lower than the guest, but then sometimes they are actually lower. So just let me know how that goes. I have a
Oh,
live. Yes.
and by the way, to that point, I'm in a hotel. My 5G is actually better than the internet access in the
Nice.
hotel. So we'll see how it's worked so far. And then I'm using this, wireless mic, which you probably can't see that well. But anyway, I'm using a
Hmm.
wireless mic, so hopefully the sound quality is good. Should be.
Yes, and as I'm shouting out here, I'm doing a threadcast on InLeo for this. And InLeo is a blockchain social media thing that lets you get paid in a variety of cryptos. And basically, a threadcast is just like the live chat for this. And so a bunch of people in the comments are, saying a bunch of stuff. You can upvote them, and they get paid for the upvotes and stuff, or you can pay paid for their comments and stuff. So it's pretty cool. It's one of the big partnerships I've been working on recently.
You said
So
in Leo.
yes. So for those, and this is just my quick little pitch on that. InLeo is basically an X. I wouldn't say clone, but it's very similar to X, like a microblogging social media platform that's built on the Hive blockchain. And Hive is a fork of Steem from back in the day. If you remember Steem,
I remember seeing it.
it's the surviving fork of Steem, since Steem's basically dead. And InLeo also it uses a couple dexes, including the Maya protocol, to be able to swap out, and this is something that's kind of new, swap out to other coins, and such as Dash is the first one that they kind of been doing this big push on. And so you should be able to just, if you don't want to deal with all their internal tokens, just, you know, you create a key store wallet, which a lot of Dex front ends use right now, and then you log in, and then you just post and do creator subscriptions, do all the kind of like advanced stuff that you can do on X, and then you just get auto payouts in Dash if you set up like that. And because of the Dex, because of the flexibility of that solution, I think it should be really easy to add any other coins that are on the Maya protocol or Thorchain pretty easily. Easier on Maya, of course, because the Leo token that they use for a lot of this backend stuff is on Maya. But basically, so like whenever Zcash gets added to Maya, it should be pretty easy to get it out in that. Bitcoin Cash might take an extra step, but you could definitely get it out in that, and other things. So anyway, just giving a shout out to because that's like that's the Hoppin' live chat right here. So that's what I'm kind of shilling right now. And it's funny because one of my you have people all over the world in the live chat. One of them is from Libya, in fact, which is definitely not, definitely a place that needs crypto after their central bank just like collapsed this year. So
Yep.
yeah, it's always good to see. All right, I'm going to get ready and roll the intro in just a couple seconds. All right, ready?
Okay.
3, 2, 1, go. So, hey everyone, officially, welcome to the Digital Cash Rundown episode, not officially any episode. This is a special edition of the Digital Cash Rundown, the Free Roger edition, dedicated to my friend and all of our, the person to whom we owe a big debt of gratitude, Roger Ver, Bitcoin Jesus, in honor of his Tucker Carlson appearance this past week, and basically coming to the forefront of the news cycle for his egregious case of facing 109 years in prison for attempting to pay all his taxes when he was a U.S. citizen 12 years ago, and now faces extradition, and it's pretty insane. And so, of course, I'm joined by Eric Day. Couldn't really think of anyone better right now to kind of do this with, because you've really been kind of running the forefront of this Free Roger movement in the moment, and it's definitely one of those great things. Like I like to say, liberty and crypto are definitely they're inevitable. They're undeniable. It's going to happen, and you can't kill crypto. You can't kill liberty, but you can kill people involved in it. And I think we always have to remember the heroes that did heavy lifting for this, like obviously like Ross Ulbricht. obviously like the Samurai Wallet folks, the Tornado Cash developers, Ian Freeman, and Roger Ver. And it's always important to remember these people, not just as honor those who came before you thing, but in this case, a lot of these people are real people who are suffering real consequences for standing up for freedom, and they could actually use help in improving their position. And that's what we hope to do with the Roger situation, is get extra attention. And I know this is probably a lot of preaching to the choir on this side of things, because I don't know how big my reach is outside of people who already are aligned on this, but any little bit helps. So anyway, thanks very much for being here, Aaron. This is always great to chat with you, but especially always great to have an excuse to highlight the Roger Ver case.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. And you've been a big supporter of his, and I know you interviewed him about his book prior to his arrest, and have always been a strong advocate. And so this is a horrible situation, and there's actually not a lot of time left. Although I am going to say I'm not pessimistic. I actually think that there's a real shot that he could be included on the list with Ross for day one. So everything that we can do, and every bit of information we can get out, and everybody that we can get to actually sign the open letter at freerogernow.org helps. It really does matter. And that's what actually helped with Ross. A big part of what happened with that was a sustained multi-year campaign by Lynn Ulbricht that led to the signing of over 600,000 signatures on a petition. And that was part of what triggered the dialogue between Angela McArdle, the head of the Libertarian Party, and Trump directly as to, what are the three big things that Trump could do to earn Libertarian support, and having Ross at the top of the list was part of it. So all of this helps. And the timing on this is absolutely right now. This is why I've been spending so much time on it, because as far as I'm concerned, we have about a month and a week to really try to drive this home.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where I definitely think that we are in an interesting situation where I am quite pessimistic about politics, right? In general. On the local level in New Hampshire, obviously it's a different thing. But even then, because I have connections in the legislative process and everything, I understand how like the deals that have to be made, even at the super local level. And Trump is not he's not like a Mike Lee or a Rand Paul, or like one of those kinds of people who's just like got a laser eye on focusing on these issues of liberty. He's kind of like, he's very much more freewheeling and, acts on instinct and stuff. So it'll be and he's also a consummate political outsider. And that means he's easily kind of probably distracted from some of these core issues. So, it's an interesting time, because he kind of came in not knowing what was going on in 2016. Now it seems like a coalition formed around Trump and came in and kind of pushed him over the line, like aggressively. And now before he gets too comfortable in these last 4 years that he got, those same people, a lot of them who were libertarians, who helped push him across the line this time, who did not help him in the previous two elections that he ran in, have to kind of stake their claim to, make sure you get paid before he gets too distracted. And I want to get paid in full. And paid in full means I want Ross free and I want Roger free. And everything else is, nice to have. But like, those are the two big things. And just like, now that Gensler's on his way out, Gary Gensler in the SEC, even if nothing significant gets overhauled in crypto, it's an improvement. So just stop the bleeding on crypto. But those two big things are what I'd really want to happen.
Yeah, I agree. And they can happen. I mean, there are a lot of people that, these pardons are not a scarce resource. So there's no reason to think about this, because there's some people, which I think that's going away. They're kind of like, well, hey, maybe he can pardon Ross first, and then the next step will be to pardon Roger. But there's actually a real opportunity to do all of it on day one. And typically a president doesn't come into office doing pardons. So this is
Hmm.
a unique time in history. Usually, a president will issue pardons. I mean, they can do it, sprinkle it throughout, but it'll often be right after the midterms and then right at the end of their term. But we already know this is a different situation for a whole variety of reasons. One, we know that Biden just pardoned Hunter, so that pretty much means there is no standard, right? Trump could pardon anyone, but obviously
Yes.
the people that we're talking about are legitimate cases of people that should be free. But
Now, and
Biden's
I
kind of set
I
the
didn't
bar.
look into it too much, but I heard rumor. And so, if this is fake news, please someone let me know. But I heard rumor that Biden also pardoned an infamous judge who was basically convicted of selling kids to prison, where he was basically doing criminal convictions of young people in exchange for direct financial support. It's very scummy, like the lowest of the low. I mean, it's okay. His sentence, he's commuted. We get that guy commuted, and we get Hunter. I mean, you understand. So you don't. I understand if it's like his literal son, that you have some leeway on judgment on that. I mean, I'm not defending it. It's still corrupt, you know. But you
Yep.
understand that more than just the random group of like awful people. And then Ross is still in prison for after well over a decade now. And Roger is, he's a much more comfortable. I would call Roger in a very comfortable prison right now, but still in a prison where he's unable to freely move about anywhere he wants. He's restricted to a geographical area. He has to check in every couple days and prove that he's still there. And he's just hoping that the Spanish government, who has absolutely zero beef with him, by the way, shows basically refuses to what do they call it? Extradite. They refuse to extradite to the U.S. And it is very crazy how they sought at the basically the last day of the statute of limitations for the case to just continue to pursue it. And right after the hijacking of Bitcoin book came out, and he started on his victory tour. In fact, like as you can see, up in there, I don't know which one. This is the point that works. Obviously, in my back, proudly in the background, have that book. I interviewed him back in April, I think, or so, April, and then I had some follow up conversations with him, and he just didn't answer for a couple of weeks. And I'm like, all right, well, maybe he's always been a very busy man. And then he comes back and he messages me and just says, "Hey, sorry," because we'd all heard by that. And he's just like, so I knew before it broke that he was out on bail for a few weeks, I guess, or a couple of weeks or something. But it was just literally, like, oh, why isn't he answering my messages? And I'm like, oh, that's no good.
Yep. Yeah, and they were fighting to put him back, and I think the U.S. government is still trying to fight to convince the Spanish authorities that he should be in prison in Spain right now. And so, what a tragic situation. And the other thing to keep in mind is, McAfee was in prison for 8 months. It took him 8 months to exhaust every possible challenge of the extradition. And then McAfee wound up dead after losing his final appeal within 24 hours. And so Roger has actually been there for 7 months. So while we don't know what the timetable is on when he's going to get this decision, if you're going to use McAfee as a precedent, then, we probably should be expecting something to happen in the next month.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully that does make the timing key on this. What I would hope for, right, is that it does not reach the level of a pardon, that the case gets dismissed or dropped or whatever. And we all know that, like, I think a lot of Americans, especially Americans, but maybe other people in the world as well, have sort of like a faith in the process and the justice system or whatever, where they just think, oh, it's going to run its course. But part of it's a combination of aging and, of course, just just being around long enough, but also just being around in liberty circles long enough to see the impetus. Like these things are not coincidences, right? It's like, show me the man, I'll show you the crime. That kind of thing is definitely, you know, the way things are going right now. And the sort of capricious actions by, for example, the SEC against crypto companies, but also these kinds of things against like Roger or the Samurai Wallet folks and the Tornado Cash folks and all that. I think that the impetus behind those is going to very much dry up in the new administration. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to stop. That doesn't mean they're going to stop trying to give them 109 years. It could, though. Do you think there's a realistic possibility they just kind of drop the case because they've, you know, they don't want to cause a conviction that then would be pardoned? Maybe. Do you think that's a realistic possibility, or do you think the pardon's kind of what we have to be hoping for?
I think the pardon's the most likely, but on the other hand, I guess if we make enough noise, I mean, now with the Tucker interview, and there are a whole bunch of other interviews that have already happened, and I think there's going to be a ton of additional press about Rogers. So there's a certain degree of this just looks embarrassing. I mean, one thing that I don't like to use them as a reference point or a role model for much, but the Church of Scientology did effectively take care of the IRS. I mean, they actually put a lot of pressure on the IRS agents actually involved in denying their 501c3 status, and ultimately ended up prevailing, which is a bad thing in a different sense, given what they do as the actual church itself. But at the same time, it has been shown that this kind of public pressure can be effective, because at the end of the day, there's somebody working at the IRS that thought, well, they made the decision selectively to go after Roger, right? They could have gone after any of a number of different people. It was very deliberate, very politically motivated. And if it looks like all of a sudden it's going to go to trial, it might be pardoned, or the odds are that Roger might actually beat the case, and in the end, they look like they were, it just denigrates the entire office if it looks like it was a political witch hunt and then they lose. So, because at the end of the day, it's some bureaucrat that's trying to get a promotion. And so they might actually weigh the amount of resources, because they don't have unlimited resources. I saw in the documents, I think that they've scheduled this for to be a 12-day trial, which, by the way, is a pretty long trial. Like, that's actually kind of insane in terms of the length of it. So this is going to be a costly thing to prosecute. And then, of course, it would be appealed. I agree with you, though, on do I think he's going to get a fair trial? Here's what I look at. And by the way, this is why I took such an interest in this. Sitting at Ian Freeman's sentencing hearing, the one thing about Ian's case is it was very clear how coordinated. They spent a considerable amount of time and money and effort to trap Ian. I mean, this was not a situation where he was clearly doing bad things. They actually had moles come in internally. They had, I think 5 different departments of the federal government involved ultimately in the raid. And during the process itself, it's very clear that they were not interested in the truth. They were very selective in the editing and the presentation of the information, which means that, unfortunately, if I've had to deal with the court system as well, I mean, if you feel like the court system is fair and they're interested in truth, understand that actually these prosecutors are just interested in getting a notch on their belt. And then, because ultimately what happens is the prosecutors, after doing these high profile cases, go into industry and then start representing white collar criminals. It's actually a pretty pathetic existence for these people. But once I saw Ian's thing, the government has been cracking down on crypto. This is part of Biden's executive order, 14067, which authorizes an entire whole of government approach to cracking down on crypto. It also authorizes exploring a CBDC. But this is why this has been so intense. But a week or 2 weeks after I had interviewed Roger, I guess in late April, I interviewed a guy named Steven Nerioff, who was the founding lawyer for Ethereum. And he actually created the legal documents for the ICO. So he created the, initial coin offering and everything else. And he didn't like some of the dealings that were going on with Ethereum and the head of the SEC at the time. So he decided to walk away from what could have been owning like half of Consensus and what would be today probably $1.5 billion worth of Ethereum, because he didn't like kind of the legal risk.
Yeah.
Well, because he was potentially seen as a whistleblower, what ended up happening is the DOJ fabricated an extortion case against him. 12 FBI agents raided his house in the middle of the night. They threw him in a van, and then they showed him a 2-page list of people. And those people happened to be The Venn diagram is the intersection of people in the Liberty space and the crypto community. I think I mentioned this last time I was on. I mean, Naomi Brockwell was on there. I mean, it was just like, that's wild. Roger was on there. Patrick Byrne, Bruce Fenton, like just all of our friends, everybody in our community was basically on this list. And Nearaf was told, unless you get information that leads to a conviction on multiple of these people, you'll never see your kids again. Well, so this was 2019. So we now know that the DOJ, without evidence, was making up other evidence and then using the FBI to try to get people to snitch on other people where they didn't even have any evidence. So at this point in time, there's no mystery about whether or not, and I guess Nearaf had actually had dinner with Roger like the week before he was arrested in Spain. I guess they had dinner together in the UAE, but it's just like, so this is coordinated and it is political. There's zero doubt about that. So now the question is he going to get a fair trial? Well, unfortunately, Roger's case is out of California. Oh. So regardless of what happens with Trump, the Trump administration is not going to magically make whatever district that court is, a balanced scenario. So I think we really, want to hope that either it gets dropped, but I think the pardon might be the best. Well, we don't have any control over the rest of it. The best case scenario is, I don't even know if it's the best case scenario. I mean, he could win. Even if he wins the extradition, that just means Roger can't travel anywhere because he has to be worried that everywhere he goes, is he going to have to worry about being arrested again somewhere, right? I think the cleanest thing would be to actually get a pardon. And I would like to, see him at PorcFest this year. And I think that's something that, he'd probably be interested in if he could get this cleared off. And, we can go back to like 2012, 2013 PorcFest, except, go back to actually talking about how to use these cryptocurrencies as alternatives to cash instead of whatever it is the narrative has become. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, so key in all this, of course, is getting attention. And thankfully at the nexus of attention and at the nexus of, attention, but also access to kind of interesting information would probably be Tucker Carlson. Now he's sort of like what I would say is he's like the if I could encapsulate it, I'd say he's like the MAGA Joe Rogan, whereas Joe Rogan obviously has a massive audience, and also historically he has kind of gone way more in depth into some niches than mainstream media of any kind, and Tucker's kind of the same way. And so someone like Roger going on something like Joe Rogan or Lex Friedman or something Tucker's a little bit more down like the conspiracy rabbit holes, which often end up being more the truth rabbit holes. So just throwing up the post on X from Tucker where he basically the Roger interview right now was at 33,000 likes, 11,000 bookmarks, and 5 million views for this. And so for anyone who hasn't seen this, it's exactly how you would imagine a Tucker and Roger interview to go, where Tucker mostly just listens, and Roger does his thing, right? His spiel, and of course a part that's different from his usual thing is just talking about how all the charges he's facing, all the basically how he could be in prison for the rest of his life if something doesn't change, and the kind of the appeal part. And that's the primary reason I would think that Tucker had him on. Of course, I don't know what all went into getting him on there, but I would assume that that's the primary interest. It's not so much, let's talk about the old school, rabbit hole of the block size wars and other things like that. It's like, no, there's an insane injustice of a capricious prosecution, and let's hear what the accused has to say. So from your perspective, do you think that the Tucker interview kind of hit all the goals on the head right there?
Well, I think certainly it was covered, because people are unaware of Roger's case. And I mean, as you know, you've been talking about it. I've been talking about it since May, but most of the public has no idea what this is. Maybe inside our circles, people know what's going on. But honestly, I've been to crypto conferences where people are like, oh, Roger's in prison. I've actually had people like, oh, Ian lost a court case like that. So it's not like this information ever gets blasted out in any any main channel. But I suspect the reason that he was on there was because of the lawfare component of it. I mean, if you think about it, there is almost kind of this, Truth Avengers, vibe with Trump coming in, with Vivek and Elon and Tulsi and everything else. And a big part of the appeal of this is that, we're going to expose the truth, whether it's JFK, whatever it happens to be. Trump said he's going to pardon the J6ers. And so I think Roger fits completely into that narrative. In fact, Roger's story is very parallel to Trump's own story. Trump has been audited continuously. Obviously, all of this lawfare that went on with Trump, a lot of that included taxes. It also included going back and retroactively reclassifying things in ways that were not in compliance with the law. He's had his attorney-client privilege violated as well. His lawyer, Michael Cohen, that was breached with Trump. And so if you look at it, I think that there's almost exact parallels here. And, Roger is being targeted for, some say the block size war. I think it's an overarching reason that Roger was targeted, and that he's probably the most effective person at spreading crypto as peer-to-peer digital cash as anyone in the world. And right now, this is the threat to central banks, and it remains the threat. So, Bitcoin, hijacking of Bitcoin aside, Roger is out there still promoting multiple cryptocurrencies like Zeno and Monero and others. He's not a maximalist of any kind, but he is a maximalist in promoting freedom and actually promoting peer-to-peer digital cash. So if you shut that voice off, and then people stick with, we've had a week where the Treasury and the chairman of the Federal Reserve have come out and said, hey, Bitcoin's not a threat to the dollar. It's digital gold. So the digital gold narrative has won. Well, guess what? We still need peer-to-peer digital cash. And so being able to silence Roger is a good way to slow that process down. This is my opinion of it anyway.
Of course. And the point about Trump and lawfare is it's a good one that I really hope sort of holds true, because obviously Trump has had the kitchen sink thrown at him, like after he got out of office. And only people, it's not like he's never done anything a little bit fast and loose in his life necessarily. He's been around, done in business a long time, etc. But it seems it's any realistic interpretation of what's happened could easily show that, someone's literally trying to do whatever they can to harm him way outside of proportion of whatever he might deserve according to the law. Now, the question with Trump is, it depends on how different Trump is and the people behind him who are actually able to influence him, not just get him in office. How different is it from 2016? Because in 2016, he came in, and as is his wont, he talked a lot of shit. And that's just kind of what he does. Oh, I'm going to do this. You'd be in jail and all this kind of stuff. And then he just gets in there, and he just kind of was like, now that I'm in there, first of all, as he mentioned later, that his actual ability to implement his policies were actively hampered. But he also sort of like, well, it was all tough talk and whatever. After the deep state came after him hardcore, the question is, now that he knows that, is he just like, I won, the people that got after me are fired, and then that's it? Or is he like, I got my eyes open to how corrupt the system is in a way that I kind of postured on before, but I didn't really understand until it almost took me out. Now I got to go right all these grave injustices. So the question is, can his attention be focused on this enough, or is it going to be like, I kind of paid off, so to speak, everyone that I need to who helped me get into office. I did this guy for the SEC, Gensler's out, I got, Doge and Vivek and, Elon in there. I got this, Patel in the FBI. All we love was Patel, put him in there. And I did all this stuff, and now I paid my debts. Now I just do Trump term 1, which would be tragic. But yeah, do you think he is kind of bound to actually want to do some meaningful criminal justice reform in this case because of what happened to him? Would you bet on that?
So I would bet that his intention is different. I think one of the things is that he learned the first time around, and which he's admitted, he was a novice and he didn't understand how government actually worked at all. He stated that. And when in this role, and this is the problem with big government and federal government to begin with, you have to hire so many people. So, I mean, how do you even know how to fill thousands of positions? And so then you end up having all of these other insiders in DC helping you vet these people because you couldn't possibly vet it all yourself. And so he ended up with a tragic set of people surrounding him. Like, in fact, I can't look at any of his cabinet members. You look at the Treasury Secretary, even the head of the S. They were all horrible. Like his AGs were horrible. We already know that he's made improvements. And so to the extent that he has Vivek and Trump and Tulsi and RFK, that is already a like 100x improvement from where he was. Like that, like he had not, think about it. Did he have anything like that? I mean, what did he have before? Jared Kushner, maybe some, some family members, like and Mike Pence, right? Yeah. Reince Priebus, like his inner circle was either the swamp or were themselves also novice, not even necessarily saying that they had bad intent. So clearly he's walking into this in a different situation. And the other thing is we know he's going to hit the ground running with pardons on day one. So he stated that over and over again, and as recently as a couple of days ago, he said this about J6. So from my perspective, this is why it's all the more important that we have to make sure that we get Roger in front of him, because it doesn't cost him anything to do this pardon. Pardoning Roger is not there's no loss of political capital, right? He's gone out and he said that he's going to keep his eye on the price of Bitcoin. He wants the United States to be the leader in cryptocurrency. He's launched his own cryptocurrency. I've seen his portfolio. He's got these, NFTs and he's got kind of an odd portfolio.
Deep into the shitcoining for sure.
He's hardcore into the shitcoining, which, hey, that's good and bad. It wouldn't be my portfolio, but nevertheless, at least he's engaged in the space. And so if he truly wants to do these big things and he wants America to be the number one place for crypto and for Bitcoin, then you can't do that while crucifying Bitcoin Jesus. Who's going to want to start a business here with this kind of arbitrary precedent on taxes? Who's going to want to do business here if literally the government can violate your attorney-client privilege and send armed IRS agents into your lawyer's office to steal your confidential communications? Right? This is a standard that this isn't even a crypto thing or a rich guy thing. This is something that applies to individuals, small businesses, international businesses. The right to attorney-client privilege is foundational. So I think it's a win for him to do this. This doesn't cost him political capital, but the reason that he should do it, and we should be all urging him to do it up front, is, as well-intentioned as he is, he's walking into a horrible economy. And I mean, it seems like they're trying to, preempt World War III. And so he's going to be handed an absolute steaming pile of crap when he gets in there. So he's going to have to fight a whole bunch of fires. They're not going to let him go in there and actually focus his attention on cleaning up the mess in Washington, D.C. They're going to give him multiple crises so that he's diverted and can't spend all of his time on that.
Oh, yeah.
So he needs to get these political prisoners out ASAP.
Yeah. And about the loss of political capital point, there's something interesting I do want to highlight on that. But one of my subscribers had a comment. Let me just throw that up. Falcon says, 109 years in prison, life imprisonment, it's the same thing, unless some robotic miracle of transporting someone's brain and organs into a machine. And unfortunately, that's kind of the situation here. It is basically a death sentence at this point. And in my perspective, as I've, 45, which is Roger's age, is pretty young and spry. And he's still like a competitive combat athlete and everything. Like, it's not like we're not talking about like some old guy, living out the last 10 or so years of his life in prison. We're talking about, one of the most important people who's been very important since his 20s in the liberty movement, getting kind of taken out for good. Kind of like a Ross Ulbricht style thing. A lot of parallels. But as far as the political capital, I got to highlight this Nick Carter quote, which I'm sure you'll appreciate very much. He says, he's a relatively well-known voice in the Bitcoin community. He says, Almost no one in Bitcoin respects this guy. He championed a hostile fork of Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, failed miserably, and has been whining ever since. He also evaded taxes and is now getting his due. So, wow. Well, I'll get your hot take on that take, and then we'll move on to the Max Kaiser one.
I mean, this is a dilemma, right? So what's odd about this is, and my understanding is, I don't know Nick personally, but he used to be a Bitcoin maxi, and then now he's something else, and I don't know what his whole story is, or maybe he switched back. There are a few people like this, this guy, Max Kaiser, and others, but the people that will be the most harmed if Roger loses are Bitcoin maxis, because again, who else was? I've seen the documents. If you go to freerogernow.org, you go to the bottom of the page. There's a link to motion to dismiss, where you can actually see the email communications between Roger and his lawyers and accountants, showing that they were going back and forth on trying to figure out how to value his cryptocurrency. Literally in 2014, there were no clear rules. We didn't know if it was an asset. We didn't know if it was a currency. Even the IRS admitted that their guidance at the time was unclear. And so what you see is evidence of Roger trying to comply with unclear laws. Well, I've got to imagine that some of these people that are, protesting or make statements like Nick just made, might want to reevaluate their own holdings and whether or not they paid their appropriate amount of taxes. Because did they hire the best professionals in 2014 to 2017? Because literally, I can't tell any other thing that Roger could have done. I mean, this is why I look at this. It's like, so if I look at, they're trying to have a chilling effect on Roger's behavior. Roger's behavior was to hire the best lawyers, hire the best accountants, and pay his taxes. So what else is somebody to have done? And, I hope all these people that are protesting this, dotted all their I's and crossed all their T's. And I would warn them that they probably didn't, since it's very clear that there weren't any guidelines. And even after, I think most people just chose not to file their taxes. And I think Coinbase ended up sending out something like 80 to 90,000 notices, retroactively telling people to pay their taxes from that time period where Roger had actually paid his, like his punishment, his crime is actually paying his taxes and hiring professionals to help him figure out how to do it. It's weird.
Yeah. And I do have to say that is, that's what makes this very much more targeted, for sure. And especially the 109 years. Not just they're trying to get something out of him. They're trying to literally destroy him. And this is something that makes it different. And I don't want to sound like I'm at all victim blaming or anything here. It does sort of differentiate on two key factors from the Ian Freeman case. And of course, I know Roger pretty well, but I know Ian a lot better. And I don't think Ian should be in prison at all. However, Ian seems to be the kind of person to have tried to walk a line a little bit closer. There were some I don't give into too many details, but he's been an activist in the way he handles kind of the law in a lot of ways, and has done acts of civil disobedience in the past. And also, Ian's sentence, while also egregious, was about 100 years shorter than Roger's. So it was also, as you mentioned, it was a very clear entrapment kind of, a very clear targeted case in Ian's case as well. They had more to work with, I think, than with Roger, where they should have had nothing to work with, and the sentence is just astronomically high, as opposed to, the Ian sentence, which is still way too high, and still there shouldn't be any. But it's way more black. Ian's case is like charcoal gray as far as black and white, dark charcoal gray. But the Roger Ver is pitch black as the night as far as this is a very targeted assault.
Yeah, there's no doubt that it's an assault. And actually, at first, when he was arrested, and then he got out on bail, what I thought was going to happen was, he'll just settle. This is basically extortion at this point. But the IRS is like, okay, we threw you in prison, and now we're going to negotiate. Now we're going to come up with some made up number, and we're going to try to force you to pay it while you're in this foreign country where you don't speak the language and where we have more negotiation. Here, now we're going to get more money. Because which
is disgusting, by the way. But this is such an upgrade, though. Just pure extortion is such an upgrade from this, which is oh, pay us $100 million. Oh my gosh, that would have been such an upgrade from the situation, and that's really sad to say.
But then look at what happened during this whole time period. During this time period, FTX settled billions of dollars of tax liability for pennies on the dollar. Nobody was threatened with jail time for this tax thing related to FTX. Michael Saylor settled a tax issue. There was no jail time with the Michael Saylor tax issue. So literally, it's now very clear. So I kind of actually thought, all right, well, once he was out of jail, because I was actually afraid for his life when he was thrown in there originally, because I'm like, okay, McAfee was there. This is not great, right? But then when he was out, I'm like, all right, well, he'll just negotiate this, and he'll probably be done with it. And then a month goes by, 2 months goes by, 3 months goes by, and then it's like, then you find out there's no negotiation. People overpay or underpay all the time. It's always this joke. It's like, okay. I pay you an amount, and you tell me how much. You already know how much I owe, but I have to actually try to guess how much you think I owe, and then I pay that in, and then at the end we figure out if there's a difference, which is that's horrendous as well. But in this case, he still doesn't know. He hasn't been given any opportunity to right the situation. I actually suspect they owe him a refund, even under their own stupid rules, based on the liquidity and the fact that Mt. Gox had collapsed and everything else. I mean, it's funny. The IRS always charges you penalties and interest when you don't pay in a timely manner. What about in reverse? What about when they, force you to overpay? Or what about his situation? Is he going to get damages, emotional damages? He's not, but it would be incalculably high if the law were actually applied in the same way based on their horrendous activities. And so he's clearly singled out. No one else is getting anything like this. It's been purely criminal, no opportunity to negotiate it. And again, it just so happens to happen during this time when, his book comes out and he's starting to talk about privacy coins. And the timing couldn't be more damaging in terms of having a chilling effect on his voice. Mm-hmm. I do find some solace in the fact that hijacking Bitcoin is now number one and has overtaken the Bitcoin standard on Amazon. I'm actually super excited about that, although there probably would have been a better way to go about doing it.
Yeah, let me actually throw that slide up on the thing, because I like to check it out myself. So it was one of my posts, which, by the way, is up to 600 likes, which for my small account is not that bad. Roger Ver's Hijacking Bitcoin book is now an Amazon bestseller. Can't stop the signal anymore. People are waking up. Thanks, Tucker. And the funny thing is, as a result of his appearance, he, of course, does his thing and just speaks from the heart about what he cares about and what is. He roped in the whole block size war thing about how Bitcoin's hijacked. And that's where you get people like Nick Carter coming from, which I think is very interesting, because another thing that I pointed out is that when he first got arrested, before he got out or anything like that, lots of Bitcoin maximalists, maybe even the majority, I would say probably the majority, actually, like half to 2/3, voiced kind of support for his release, because they're like, oh, we don't like this guy, but it's crazy what happened to him. And now that was before they even knew about the 109 years. And but because he appealed to this and included his criticism of Bitcoin and the way it is scaled and how it works for freedom money, I mean, hint, it doesn't. Now all of a sudden you have a blowback effect where now there's swarms of internet trolls and people like Nick Carter. Screw you, Nick, by the way, for that comment. I want to be charitable, but screw you. Now you have a lot of the same people who might have said this is egregious are now saying, screw that guy, get rid of him, because he came for their bags, sort of. And it's not even like he came for their bags. He just said what he said. It's interesting how the block size war gets kind of roped into this, because there's very little commentary from him on Bitcoin Cash specifically during the interview. He mentioned Zano, of course. He mentioned Monero. He mentioned a few other things as well. And so go ahead.
Well, one of the other things that he mentioned. So when you watch that interview, so if you believe in the digital gold narrative, which is what these BTC maxis believe, then Roger's like fine with that, right? I think he even said that in the interview. So hey, congratulations, you're a BTC maxi, and the digital gold narrative is the digital gold narrative. Roger, I think, would argue that we still need peer-to-peer digital cash, and we certainly need some alternative. Digital gold is not enough to be an alternative to CBDCs. But one of the things that Roger announced in that interview is something called confidential layer. So he actually offered something of value to the BTC community, which is the ability to bridge your Bitcoin into Zano and make it private. Clearly, the lack of privacy of Bitcoin is turning out to be a problem. Clearly, there's more chain analysis happening than people think. A lot of people will say, oh, no, it's too expensive and everything else. And it's like, no, they've actually done a lot more than people want to actually realize. And all of the exchanges now are handing over information to the IRS. This stuff is now easily tracked. Yes, you can figure out a way to hide with this stuff to a certain degree if you spend a lot of time, and most people are just simply not going to do that. So Roger actually offered something that can help improve the value of people's Bitcoin by making it private. I obviously don't think he had enough time to go into that in great detail, but I hope people maybe start looking at the fact that Roger actually did the BTC community a solid by offering a new privacy tech.
Yeah, for sure. And I have to say, the free market is a beautiful thing, and I think that because of the choices we have, especially with open source technology, open source currencies, the hijacking of Bitcoin is an important historical footnote, I believe, and kind of very evident in some of these responses, by the way, as far as like the attitude shift. But it's not fatal anymore, because not only do we have tons of different alternatives, but a lot of these alternatives are taking the Bitcoin store of value and applying censorship-resistant digital cash principles to it, or attributes to it, I should say. And so I think that Bitcoin is going to scale and get all these cool features that we missed out on for all these years, whether they like it or not. And there's nothing they can do about it with Bitcoin's core protocol itself not changing. There's an interesting project that I'm learning a little bit more about called Threshold. And Threshold basically uses similar technology to something like, say, Thorchain to trustlessly bridge Bitcoin onto any number of EVM chains. So basically what that means is you can go send Bitcoin into an address, and it spits you out a tokenized version of Bitcoin on, let's say, Ethereum or Solana or one of these kinds of things. You can send it around. You can send it through the Railgun smart contract and get Zcash level privacy on your Bitcoin and send it around for much lower fees, do all kinds of crazy DeFi stuff, and then you can just unwrap it and just the machine spits, real Bitcoin back out at you. And of course with the awful fees and stuff, but whatever. So stuff like that, the fact that this
well, confidential layer does that, but with 0.3% fees. So this stuff is happening, and the market's great.
Yeah, and this is going to happen on many chains, I believe. And at this point, like, it's not really a fight worth fighting anymore about, like, Bitcoin's sort of achieved a certain amount of escape velocity. It's the new gold, sort of. It's like the new boomer coin. Some people are going to use it. It's what I would say long-term security model prospects and stuff. There's still iffy. There's still a lot of questions to see what will happen. Who knows if Bitcoin will be a standard store of value, whatever, in 10 years, or if it's going to be replaced. But who cares? Because right now there's lots of options for people to use fully decentralized scarce cryptos, as well as use those same chains to transact in Bitcoin's value. So it is kind of interesting how, like, just by highlighting this basic fact and not even saying get rid of Bitcoin, saying no, there's options of using Bitcoin as digital cash, not by using Bitcoin Cash as a separate chain entirely, but and by the way, Bitcoin Cash might have BTC denominated something like that at some point as well, ironically. So just by pointing out that one little thing, and now all of a sudden you have hordes of people coming in. Like as I'll highlight right here, the unfortunate Max Kaiser comment, which kind of usually takes the cake on this, but he basically just said "rotten hell douchebag," and then of course you called him what I think is a very kind and generous characterization of a giant piece of shit. I think you could go a lot worse than that, to be honest. And for the record, not only is Max Kaiser also a super early Bitcoin person who also super early probably paid nowhere near the amount of taxes that Roger did, and also is a government stooge right now. He works for the government of El Salvador, spreading all kinds of fake news, trying to promote the country, which I think there's a lot of positives you could say about El Salvador as far as the turnaround that's happened over the last few years. Over, is it a good, cheap place to live? Is it a good business climate because of capital gains? There's a lot of good things, but man, this guy's turned out to be quite the rotten egg.
He has, and and even still, I wouldn't want to weaponize the IRS against the guy, right? Like this is like, who does that? I guess we've somehow lost our way if people are becoming IRS maxis, and that almost seems like what some of these people are. And again, I want to stress that these people are actually acting against their own self-interest, because if Roger loses again, the Bitcoin maxis are going to be the ones that are going to be targeted. Do you think that they just tracked Roger's stuff and just Ian's stuff and just Ross's stuff? I mean, we know that they've built all of this out. And I actually spoke with someone at an event who worked for the IRS and said that the area of hiring, there's these 87,000 IRS agents, the area of top focus is crypto. So this needs to be stopped. Like, Roger is standing in the way of everybody being audited for crypto. I mean, that's essentially how important this case is. But yeah, Max is problematic, and his behavior is. I mean, he said something the other day. Bitcoin is older than Jesus. Like, I think he says some stuff that is just way out there. And now he's siding with governments. And then but here's the thing. Most Bitcoin maxis don't even agree with Max Kaiser, and I can't tell you how many Bitcoin maxis I talk to are like, every time Saylor says something new now, they cringe, right? It's actually hard for. Usually, what they end up saying is, "Well, that's not really what Bitcoin is. That's this guy's opinion, but he doesn't control, how the development works within Bitcoin." So there are a lot of people that are Bitcoin maxis. So I think this whole Bitcoin maxi argument, I think it is worthwhile to point out the behavior of the egregious people who don't even reflect the values. I've also found recently, I've talked to some people that got into Bitcoin, and the black size wars happened or whatever, and then they've just been holding their Bitcoin, and they didn't pay attention to what's going on. They've seen that the price is going up, but they haven't been involved in any of the developments. They haven't. And then you show them something from Saylor, because it hasn't been on their radar, and their jaw drops, because they had no idea that all of a sudden the number one person talking about Bitcoin is saying that it's not for competing with the dollar, the euro, MasterCard, or Visa. It's for complying with KYC. And now you have to be a nut job if you believe you need to have self-custody. Like, the people that kind of thought, okay, well, Bitcoin won, now I'm just going to store it on a hardware wallet and forget about it. Now they're looking at this saying, what's going on here? Yeah,
for sure. And I definitely noticed, like, I'm much more involved in the Dash community of other cryptocurrencies, and as quite a large sleeper community of just like, you see a little price bump. There's some news that the Evolution upgrade came out, and all of a sudden, all these people are like, "Hey, I haven't seen you in 5 years. Where have you been?" "Oh yeah, I just been busy with other stuff." "Oh hey, what's going on now?" And then they're just the reactivation of just the sleeper cells. And Bitcoin, I'm sure, because it kind of reached escape velocity as kind of the symbol of this entire new financial system and blockchain technology and everything, so many people had some Bitcoin who weren't deep enough into crypto to get anything else. And the one thing I will say, though, is first of all, a lot of these people have been way too complacent with people like Saylor, and be like, "Wow, he says crazy stuff, but whatever." And they haven't been like, "Well, this guy is speaking for you. This guy is blocking open source funding for development of Bitcoin. This guy is bringing in a bunch of statists. This guy is doing all kinds of things. This guy's pushing custodial solutions and talking smack about self-custody. And this is directly affecting you." And I think that it's kind of an interesting point where if Bitcoin BTC hits escape velocity to where it seems like at least 2 U.S. states are talking about strategic reserves and stuff, and if it just becomes this thing that the market really values at people having some in, then it's just up to the rest of us to make sure that I'm fine. Like, I'm not attached to anything other than I want to live free and want other people to live free and be prosperous. I'm fine with every single crypto out there being relegated to gas token status, where it's like, let's just say Zano. Like, no one ever transacts in Zano. They only use the network to transact in Bitcoin, and Zano is the gas, the oil, the commodity that powers the moving of Bitcoin. I don't care. That's fine as long as we can live free and be free of inflation. It's good with me, and I think it's good with Roger as well. And it is kind of crazy though to see this giant backlash from just pointing out a few of these basic truths without a conclusion that Bitcoin needs to be smashed. And as I pointed out when I first shared the thing, my kind of conclusion was free Roger or you're a Fed. Which is obviously a Twitterized X version of, my opinion. It's, it's a little bit, it's truncated, but I stand by it too,
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair assessment, and hopefully people will come around. And I'm going to be working on trying to get pardon letters from politicians and influential people to get to Trump as part of kind of a package, and so I may reach out to certain Bitcoin maxis, and it is interesting because I haven't actually talked to some of these people in like 10 years either. So I don't even have any idea where some of these relationships have gone. It's like a lot's happened since Porkfest 2012 or whatever, and who knows how people went on their own way. But it would be good to get a contingent of influential Bitcoin maxis on Roger's side. And some have already come out publicly, but I think we want to solidify that even more as quickly as we can. Again, we've got like 5 weeks.
Yeah. I guess we'll see. Because Trump, with the crypto Trump connection, has been one of the most interesting ones, because I kind of feel like with every single one of the other coalitions that formed around him to kind of push his candidacy over the line, I feel like the crypto one is simultaneously the most important of all of them as far as the most influential. Unless you count, I would say Elon Musk is number one by a massive margin, actually. But who knows what all went into his thing, what tipped him. But if you count anything other than Elon, it's Elon and then it's probably crypto. But you could tell when he talks to crypto, he sounds like, my parents when they're talking to me about crypto, as far as like, for lack of a better term, boomer as fuck. Like, he just knows people love this Bitcoin thing. And, I got to be the greatest Bitcoin president and all this. The vaguer he is, the more you realize he doesn't really understand it.
Yep.
And so a lot of the people, he understands he's going to make Bitcoin great. And a lot of the people who are into that, who are talking to him, are all Bitcoin maximalists, not the freedom fighters. Now, of course, right, the swamp draining Tucker Carlson kind of element is literally the core of his entire candidacy. Everyone in 2016, as well as 2024, even though they're vastly different groups of supporters, were swamp drainers at the end of the day, of some kind of the system here is broken and it's not working. Come in and stop some of this madness, please. And I hope that that's strong enough for him to be like, oh yeah, this is a swamp. This is the swampiest thing I've seen all day on my first day. In fact, let's pardon the guy, rather than, is it going to make the maxis mad? I think ironically, maybe pardoning him is the easiest way to get him to shut up, because he's on this media tour right now. It's not a book tour anymore, even though it's doing pretty well for the book. Hijacking Bitcoin, go get it, go read it. It's the please don't throw me in prison for the rest of my life tour. And if you take that off the table, he doesn't have that. He would never be on Tucker just for whatever he's talking about, probably.
Probably not.
Would.
No.
Maybe he would not this quickly. And so if you want him to stop talking, stop doing this thing, get him to shut up by pardoning him. Just take it off the table. And I really hope that Bitcoin maximalists see that. The one thing that when talking about Bitcoin Jesus, people called him that because Jesus as a corollary for just a saving hero because of what he did in the early days. He built the movement from nothing. He was the first angel investor in any kind of crypto companies, Bitcoin, because there wasn't really other cryptos back then. But unfortunately, by trying to nail him on the cross of 109 years, etc., this is making him into the Bitcoin martyr at this point. And there's nothing quite I guess it would be very self-serving for people who care about freedom money to have such an important martyr to talk about. But I don't care about that. I care about the man. I don't want him and his life thrown away, right? Have some mercy on this thing. I hope that the Maxis can understand that we just got to get this guy pardoned, and they dodge a bullet of having this martyr who some of his final words were about this book and about the hijacking and things that make them look bad. Because as I mentioned with the off-chain solution type things, we're at the technological point where we can just the maximalists who dislike Roger can just wait just a year or so, and he's not a problem anymore, because now he's promoting things that transact in Bitcoin. And if you get him talking, he'll talk about it was hijacked and then the censorship of on Reddit and all the other forums. He can bring that up if you get deep enough, but the surface level, he's just going to be talking about things that pump their bags. So, Maximus, I know you don't like me. I don't really like you either. Feelings mutual, but let's get this guy pardoned. How about, huh?
Yeah, no, get him pardoned. Again, it'll help you because otherwise the IRS will be coming after you next. And yes, it will take this off the table, because if he doesn't get pardoned right away, it's not that the campaign to raise awareness is going to stop. If anything, it would ratchet it up. This doesn't go away, right? Yeah, this will turn into a situation where, we'll double down and everything else. But the best situation for everybody, especially Roger, is that he doesn't spend a second in prison and is out. And that will benefit the entire ecosystem. It'll also benefit, from Trump's perspective, the U.S., because now, people might it will have a chilling effect if you are the leading guy investing in and promoting an ecosystem that turns into a multi-trillion-dollar asset and you get thrown in prison for 109 years. That will not help make America great. That will not help make America the Bitcoin country or the crypto country. People are going to go to the UAE. People are going to go to different countries. People will not do business here. So no one actually benefits, including Bitcoin maxis, by Roger being in prison. Literally no one benefits except for central banks. I mean, let's be realistic. Those are the only people that really don't like Roger at the end of the day, because he's effective at getting people to adopt innovative currencies that are outside of state control. And so I hope we all agree, whether you're a Bitcoin maxi or not, that the central banks are the bad guys and the IRS are the bad guys. So let's at least go back to some common sense. If we can't unite around that, then boy, we've really gone off the rails.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. And it is kind of a good point of crypto is, I don't know if I expected it to be more adopted, like the actual blockchains be more adopted by end users by now in the cycle. But it's the power on the global stage of blockchain technology is probably higher than I would have thought many years ago at this point. Now, what really made it an issue in the US was not thousands of people using this stuff and using the, like Monero on the streets to buy their, chicken and eggs and drugs and whatever else, and then they're being cracked down on and thrown into cages for and there was a public uprising. No, that's not how it worked out at all. It was just a lot of investors, but especially a lot of companies, industry. The U.S. is the hotbed for the crypto industry, and which is almost bizarre. Well, it's not if you think about it, but if you think about it deeply, but it is kind of bizarre if you think about from the perspective of how bad the U.S. has been on crypto for a lot of things. Better than Europe in some ways, but worse than Europe in others. And then, of course, there's the rest of the world. And the thing that really kind of tipped things in one direction is, the SEC was, the various arms of the law enforcement branches have been going after a variety of crypto people and charging them with crimes and doing all kinds of this horrendous stuff. But what really tipped the scales was when they started messing with people's money and businesses, where the big businesses, I should say, where Coinbase, go after Coinbase, go after Kraken, go after everything. And when the Winklevoss twins each, plus Jesse Powell of Kraken, each gave $1 million of their personal funds to the Trump campaign, you know it's just like, all right, we want to do business in America. We think that we can get that done with Trump. If he doesn't win, we're going to have to move. It's just period. We're going to have to not do this in the U.S. It's a lot cheaper to throw $1 million at Trump than it is to relocate our entire business out of the country. Yep. And so they kind of did that. And no matter how much reform, which there needs to be massive reform, and hopefully crypto and all its complexities end up being a catalyst for IRS reform. That you hear a lot of talk about, like flat tax type things, that and exempting capital gains for certain things, and just all kinds of stuff. You see a lot of that kind of stuff coming to the forefront when it was just a background conversation in years past. And you can't really do all this reform and then just have Mr. Big Business grandfather of crypto himself, who tried to give the government obscene amounts of money, I'm sure, and you throw this guy in prison for 108 years because the laws weren't super clear. Well, if you want people to be comfortable doing business in America, even if the new regime is good, you don't want people to be like, well, I'm going to come and do business in America, but they're going to find out about some other old stuff that I did, which to the best of my knowledge was compliant, but it wasn't. And now I'm in prison forever. It's a giant chilling effect on the big business capital that Trump is trying to get into the U.S. Like, for example, expediting, I forget what it was, where he's expediting something for billionaires. And I can't remember the exact headline, but basically he's made a lot of big business plays. And pardoning or commuting. And here's the thing. Roger is, let me play statist advocate for a little bit, which, I might have to take a second shower just after doing so bear with me. But like from the government type perspective, you understand Roger is a troublemaker a little bit. He, talks a lot of smack about government. He got arrested and originally went to prison over selling fireworks without a license. Again, no one else did. It was another very targeted thing. And he's kind of a repeat offender of freedom, as far, if you want to say, is in he's always going to talk about how, the injustices of government, and definitely the U.S. government as the largest government in the world right now. So I understand it's like, I understand the case of like, well, this guy wants to like, same thing with Ross Ulbricht, right? He allegedly, again, pioneered a project which was what I would call, extra legal, not illegal necessarily, but just that provided a commercial platform regardless of the legality of the commerce that took place in. That's kind of the entire point of it. And I can see why Law and Order Trump and people like that would be like, I wouldn't want to like send the message that I'm for this. Trump being a felon now does make the equation a little bit different. Ross, I'm much more confident in because, first of all, he explicitly talked about it. But also, Ross served 12 years. If you commute Ross's sentence and just let him out now, he got punished very harshly for, alleged illegal activity in a way that really satisfies the Law and Order kind of a thing, while still making the crypto people think that Trump is a saint now, even though he let him be in prison for 12 years at this point. Now, right. That's, I guess, my backup hope for Roger, right? I want everything. I want him to lose the extradition. Like, I want them to lose the extradition appeal so the U.S. loses that thing. And I want the charges dropped. That's what I want, number one. But if we can't get that and he gets something and gets immediately pardoned or commuted or whatever, that's my second thing. But past that, I'd like, if the worst happens and they do make him, a favorable plea deal, or favorable to like his freedom plea deal, I should say, or whatever, repeat of what he had to do before for the fireworks thing, but then just out after that. Whatever just doesn't give first off, whatever helps Roger, number one, is like that's 99.9% of my concern. Just whatever helps him live the best life he can. Beyond that, whatever doesn't send a big chilling effect, because as you mentioned, like there's people close to me on that Venn diagram list that you mentioned as far as targets who are just nowhere near as spicy as Roger. Like Roger's clearly spicy. And again, Ross Ulbricht clearly has some spicy, not anymore, he's not spicy, but I understand some of that. But like for those of us who operate very well within the system, who pay taxes, who encourage others to do so to stay out of prison, not because it's not theft, because it is, but who are very kind of like safe and legit and all this kind of stuff. I wouldn't, I have to say, I admit that I'm a little bit worried for, a lot of people, including both of us, right? Just from this, I'm not extremely worried, but it's there. If they're going after people capriciously like this, and it's not just Roger, it's further down the list. I do think it needs to stop here.
It has to stop here. And of course we're on the list because, I'm going around the country warning people about CBDCs and teaching them how to use privacy coins. And then I'm advocating for a guy that's looking at 109 years. But I have people, I go to some of these things and people pray for me. And I'm kind of like, this is the fact that you think you have to do that. That's the problem. And this is actually why we have to do this. But in Roger's case, but Roger hasn't done it. Like, again, he paid his taxes. And so his crime was selling fireworks without a license. Cabela's other people were doing this. He's the only person to go to prison for this. So the rest of the time he's complied with laws. Yes, he's spoken out about taxes. And obviously he was very passionate about talking about the ATF, burning children to death. And he's been very passionate about, Madeleine Albright and what she, had to say flippantly about, we had to kill 500,000 Iraqi children. It was worth it. For a guy to get punished for being passionate that it's a bad idea that our government murders children, like that shouldn't even be a controversial situation, right? Everybody should be outraged about our government murdering innocent children, whether they're in our country or in other countries. And so, I don't find his positions to be that controversial, and he complied with the laws. So again, I think the intersection with Trump is actually pretty high here. So the only question is, can we get it in front of him in time? And that's all it boils down to. And I will tell you, there's other stuff going on that I can't talk about, but I'm pretty excited about the after effects of some of these other interviews and things that have already happened. I mean, there was the Charlie Kirk interview with Tracy Thurman, with Roger, with the censored tape over him. That had a big impact because Charlie Kirk is very close to Trump. So I have to think that this is getting directly on his radar. And so now it's, like I said, I'm going to go all out. Well, as long as it takes, but in particular for the next month, and to make sure that we really build momentum as we go into the inauguration and make it a no-brainer. Again, make it a win for Trump. You said something earlier that I think is absolutely true, that part of the problem that I've had with Trump is I can't identify a political principle. I have no way of understanding, based on some sort of political philosophy or ideology, what he's going to do about anything. There's no consistency to it, but he does seem to believe in whether it's intuition or kind of almost like there's a vibe, right? So I feel like that if he hears about it from Charlie Kirk and then Tucker Carlson, and then maybe you're right, maybe he goes on Joe Rogan, and then there's this big groundswell and everything else as we build into the thing, then he's going to be like, oh yeah, the people want this. This will be popular for me. There's no downside. It fits in with other stuff that I'm doing. It doesn't cost me anything. Sure, let's get it done. Like that to me feels like how, not that I'm an expert on this guy, but I've tried to find what the principles are. That didn't work. So this vibe thing seems to be a good way to go.
Yeah, it's definitely like the vibe. It's kind of allowed him to surpass a lot of these barriers that people have of like the deals that you have to have already in place. But definitely, if people associate this case with all the other kinds of injustices, it depends on just having an audience. And so one thing that's kind of interesting in one of the surprise hits of his first administration. There were few and far between. I'll give it that. There's not a lot of good stuff, but there's a few interesting ones. One was Kim Kardashian in her giant rear glory coming in and kind of negotiating a whole lot of criminal justice reform and sentence commutation and things like that that were not big, like, issue celebrity things. Like, Roger is kind of a celebrity, but like we're talking about people who aren't. I mean, Kardashian was for sure and still is, but now at the point where hopefully he has that same knack now that he has been now that the system has come after him, which I should highlight a subscriber comment here, which kind of goes a little bit. Let me just throw that up on the screen. Simple Game said, "Sorry, Trump is not a felon. No sentencing was done. You're not a felon until you're sentenced, and most of the time, not until your appeals are done." Blah blah blah. And so, yeah, maybe a nitpick, I would say, but like, yeah. Anyway, just getting on that one. Now that he has been a convicted felon, right? And that's really kind of changed a lot of attitudes where you have. When people were talking about first black president or whatever, which, is it's kind of a funny, way of characterizing things. But the thing about, like, a lot of people in communities outside of the I would say, like, a liberal Caucasian elites maybe have experienced the justice system in a way that doesn't really give them great faith. And hopefully because of all this, and then the January 6th protesters, of course, like, they got in, some people who I actually know, local to both of us, right?
Yep.
Had some they were there, and therefore they get hunted down, kind of, and just something bad they get thrown in prison or whatever. And just hopefully that whole criminal justice passion plus reform passion, I should say, plus this entire, like, drain the swamp vibe, hopefully gets caught up in this whole vibe thing, that this is one of those people that's been kind of caught up into it. And hopefully, and here's the thing, Roger has a lot of business interests still. Maybe he's viewed as I have no idea how much money he actually has, but if he held on to any BTC in particular, I'm sure, he's still doing very well for himself. Well, let's hope after this whole thing is over. It would be, who knows if maybe there's some sort of a, oh, look, we'll pardon you or whatever. And hey, by the way, do you want to invest and own some business in the U.S. or something like that? Which, again, Roger's not a citizen or a resident anymore at all. Who knows how that would work out? But trying to get wealthy investors to put money back in America is a big Trump thing. And
yes, yeah, exactly. I was going to say, and he should be doing this because, again, the block size thing is such a small part of all of this. And it's even such a small part of Roger's investments, right? Mm-hmm. He has Bitcoin.com. He invested in Kraken. He invested in BitPay. He was the co-founder of XRP. And then there's stuff that he has on his website. And then I found other stuff just as I've been traveling around. It's like, oh, he was in this coin and this coin. I don't even know if I should talk about it. But he's been involved in a variety of privacy coins and a variety of other projects, like, from the very beginning. And so it's like massive how wide his footprint is, because he literally was the only guy investing in any of this stuff. And so, and he really lives his principles. Like, okay, well, this is a different idea. Let's experiment with this. Let's experiment with this. And he's continued. He never stopped doing that. He just stopped. He went for a period of time where he wasn't as public. Which, I don't blame him. And then he was kind of just starting to do his comeback tour. And I don't know how much of his comeback tour, again, he spoke at Token 2049, and the issue for there, and I shared a clip on that, and he was talking about privacy tokens. And I even saw it because somebody just sent me the clip. I just saw it for the first time like a week ago. And he listed in his bio that he was like the co-founder of XRP, which I've never actually seen that in his bio, right? Mm-hmm. But he's out there still promoting and working on new innovative projects. He just hasn't been as vocal. And now all of a sudden, here he is on Tucker Carlson. So he's back, and I hope he stays back, but not in a situation where He's fighting for his freedom, but he is continuing to fight for peer-to-peer digital cash. The other part about this is, and I think we talked about this last time, he's supported so many other causes. So, anybody that's hyper focused on this Bitcoin thing should look at the fact that he, funded Fee. He funded antiwar.com. He's funded countless people that we know personally in the Liberty movement that have worked on various projects. He was the founding donor of Brownstone. When the COVID lockdowns happened, he helped out a bunch of people personally that lost their jobs and lost their income. Like he literally just provided direct assistance for people. So it's like most people don't know about any of that, actually. So as I've gone around, the truth is, because he hasn't lived here for 10 years, when I travel around, most people haven't heard of him at all because he's been gone for a long time. But those that have heard just this like really weird narrow slice. And part of it is because Roger's not public about this. Most of the stuff that he does, he's not doing any of this for recognition. He's actually doing it to help people. So people don't even know. Like they only see the tip of the iceberg. But the underlying theme is he truly promotes voluntarism, and he fights for people that fight for truth and justice, and people who are persecuted by the government for engaging in voluntary interactions. Like that is just a resounding theme, and it's been completely consistent ever since the first time I met him. Like there's no deviation from that. So it's an amazing thing, and I hope more people learn about that aspect. And I hope what comes out of this is that people learn who he is as a person. Because if people actually understood all of this stuff, then like his profile and his ability to do whatever he wants to promote next is going to be unstoppable.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also, when you mentioned like the other COVID stuff, I do remember when I was interviewing him a few years ago in 2020, and he was under curfew at the time, like is in, you could not leave in St. Kitts, which as bad as it got in the US in a lot of places, it didn't get quite that bad. And I do remember also like right after the Bitcoin Cash split, he was lamenting the way the block size problems, and he mentioned Bitcoin Cash, but he wasn't even involved. He wasn't even very positive sounding about the fork anyway. And so people try to like spread this fake news that he tried to hijack or he did this. Now, like I have proof of him talking about Bitcoin Cash before he even was interested, much less involved. And just kind of offhandedly mentioning it and saying, well, people are trying this, but it would have been way better if Bitcoin had this and that. And then I have lots of talk about, you talk to someone, you see the evolution, you see how he starts focusing a lot more on privacy. And especially now that I'm sure that a lot of privacy problems with Bitcoin end up biting him in the ass right now, serving to give information that would then, harm him. I'm sure he's much more pro-privacy as a result. And that's probably one of the reasons why he gives Bitcoin Cash less airtime than he does stuff like Monero or Zeno, for example. And it's pretty clear to see kind of like he's been remarkably consistent. He's one of the most consistent people I've ever met. Is sometimes to his fault, right? Sometimes to his detriment as far as like just how laser focused he's been, but also a very evolutionary thinker where when he believes a thing and then he changes his mind. And I think that's what people really did not like about him, the maximalist, I should say, is that he did change his mind based on new information, where he was not early on involved in the block size war. He was sitting back. And then later he got involved, and he was a huge Bitcoin proponent and now does not promote that same Bitcoin. And then he promotes Bitcoin Cash heavily. And now he's much more agnostic, multi-coin, whatever. He did believe that Craig Wright was Satoshi at one point, and then he changed his mind, and then he sued Craig Wright. And, when you get new information, so he's definitely a treasure of the crypto and Liberty space. And I think that his legacy is already undeniable, but there's more work that he's going to do. It's not like, I don't want to make it sound like I'm criticizing Andreas Antonopoulos, but he was a very pivotal figure in the early days of Bitcoin as far as an educator. And even in the mid days, like not even so early, he still kept up with the new technology elsewhere in the blockchain. And then he's kind of retired. He kind of disappeared, right? I know people who've seen him at conferences listening to talks like as of this year, but so he's still there. He just kind of like sort of retired from public view and all that kind of stuff, and which is his right? If you do so much, do it, sure. But Roger's never going to do that. He's a fighter from day one to day, the end of the days, and that's one thing you can also definitely say about Trump is he's a fighter too. And I wish he'd always fight for what's the best for freedom and stuff. But hopefully the fighter, the fighter in me recognize the fighter in you. Hopefully that happens with this.
Yep, and again, I think it will. I'm sure if Trump talked to Roger, that would, for 15 minutes, it would be a done deal, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think they would absolutely get along tremendously. And so it's just a question of, with all the stuff going on in the world, can we get this attention out there? And I think we can. I actually really do. I think that with just the momentum that's building, I'm actually pretty optimistic about this. And I me long enough to know I'm not typically optimistic about political processes.
Yeah. Well, so let's just wrap up by hitting up the polymarket odds real quick, because just out of curiosity, I threw them up on the screen here.
I haven't even looked for a couple, a day or so.
polymarket.com/event/Trump-pardons will take you there. And so thrown up on the screen. Who will Trump pardon in the first 100 days? Ross Ulbricht he doesn't top the list, but he is the most bet on at 69% chance, and with about $2.5 million in volume, I guess. Himself is 9%. He's not going to pardon himself. January 6th protester is the only one above Ross that I could see right here at 93%, where highly likely he's going to kind of, fix his own. And then you scroll down the list, Steve Bannon, whatever. Edward Snowden, 17%. Julian Assange, 22%. And then you get down to Roger Ver at 29%. Now, I think that those odds will probably shift over time. Let's hope they do. Well, actually, who actually cares what the polymarket odds say? I care about the actual outcomes. But 29% is considering who all else is on this list of Matt Gaetz, Eric Adams, Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, Steve Bannon. It's around the same level as Steve Bannon, although Bannon's already out, right? He's not. Yep. As far as I understand, there's nothing really to pardon other than just to erase his record.
I think he might have other charges or something going on. I can't follow all of it. He's got a multi-pronged thing. So
yeah, it's so the fact that Roger is there on that list when he has no connection to Trump yet at all is pretty cool, and I'm happy to see that Ross is so high on the list as well. He's almost 70%. He's higher than the Trump chances for winning the election ever got on polymarket, and we saw how overwhelming that ended up being. So let's just keep it going. I do want to give a special shout out to Hilawi in the comments. Hilawi's a great dude, great crypto dude and friend of freedom, but he did mention that Donald Trump Jr. has been very vocal on the Ross thing, especially in his dad's ear. And I mean, supposedly Barron Trump is actually the one who told one of the people who convinced him. At least that's who Trump gives credit. A lot of people are taking credit for putting Ross Ulbricht on Trump's radar for the pardon this year, but he himself mentioned Barron. Now, Roger's not quite the everyone wants Ross. Everyone wants Ross out. Not everyone necessarily wants Roger to avoid prison, unfortunately, but they should. But I would say, if Don Jr. might be a good person to get in the ear of. Obviously, keeping on hitting the IRS overreach is one of those areas where the giant heavy hand of the state is a very conservative interest, and so the conservatives hate the IRS, even though it funds a lot of the stuff that they like, right? It's sort of necessary for all the wars which conservatives aren't even in the wars that much either, but they're into the defense contractors and everything else. So that's why Charlie Kirk, that's why Tucker Carlson, that's why all these kinds of things kind of took an interest in the case, and hopefully we get a thread through this. So I guess I'll just wrap up by throwing up the freerogernow.org on the screen. Anything else you want to say about this before we close it?
No, I just encourage people to sign the open letter, and then I actually, message people that with the link. You can share it on social media, do that as well. But again, any external link gets suppressed. So we're going to have to do this the hard way. In fact, it probably was easier for Ross because the suppression on external links wasn't as bad. So the struggle with this is actually getting the URL out to people. So anything that you can do, I would suggest pick 3 people to start. And see what you can do to help get more names added to that list.
Yeah, for sure. Let's just everyone get on that petition. Everyone sign, everyone spread the word, and everyone who knows a Bitcoin maximalist of some kind, who might be on the fence or talking smack about this or that, let them know how good it is for their bags that Roger does not get thrown in prison and give a chilling effect on investment in the U.S. and in the crypto space. And the second layer stuff is, we'll wait for that to become more relevant, I guess. But it's a great time to be a crypto fan and person and user and especially investor. And it's kind of getting close to the escape velocity element. And we just have to make sure that we don't, selfishly leave those behind who helped get us there. And none of us would be here without Roger. That's for damn sure. So thanks everyone for watching. This has been a fun discussion. Thanks, Aaron, for being on and helping kind of promote this to, probably, very captive audience, but hopefully it gets out to a few more people. Everyone go to freerogernow.org and sign the petition. And I guess I'll see you guys next week. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.